Hey, this is Evan Schmidt, Schmitty Racing Suspension. Just wanted to give you guys a short video on replacing the end cap on a Fox podium shock. Actually, we've got a shock off of the new Polaris Dynamax 1000 Turbo, and the customer brought it in, and we're going to be putting a dual rate spring kit on it. This one's going to be installed with our billet race preload collar and true dual rate with adjustable crossover collars. So we'll be doing that after we get done with replacing the shock end cap. But what we're going to be doing today is basically just showing you the process of how easy it is to replace these end caps. Most of the Fox podiums and Performance Series shocks come with these end caps from the factory that use a self-healing pellet. And from the factory, we found that a lot of the shocks don't come with enough nitrogen from the factory to really make the shocks perform like they should. And also a decent percentage of them, we found that actually those pellets have begun to leak, and then the shock has no charge or very little charge, and then the shock just doesn't perform very well, or it will actually begin to leak once the seals relax. So we actually made a replacement end cap that increases the volume of the nitrogen in the shock, which actually keeps it at its whatever pressure you're charging it to for a longer period of time. It also has some residual cooling, shock cooling, and that's just a side peripheral benefit of it. And then these caps also have a Schrader valve installed in them, so that they're much easier to service and recharge. So anyway, you can do this on the bench. Today we're doing it here on the bench, but you could easily do it on a vehicle, which many people do that. And really the only difference between here and on a vehicle would be that if you're going to do it on the vehicle, you should jack your vehicle up so that there is no vehicle load on the shocks while you're actually doing this modification. Other than that, everything is really identical. It's nothing really stopping you from doing it on the vehicle versus on the bench like we're doing today. First step would be take a drill with a 1/8 inch drill bit and drill out the center rubber plug, which is going to release any residual nitrogen and pressure that is in the shock, if there is any, which I've already done already. And just to kind of shorten up the video, at that point you would push your cap in, which is going to expose this snap ring. And you're just going to take a pick and get that snap ring removed. And just want to wipe that down, make sure you get any grit or drilling material off there, and set that aside. What works best usually is a couple of flat blade screwdriver. There is a fan on the end of these caps, and at that point you can kind of get a hold of them and pry it out. Like I said, this one I've actually already released the nitrogen and removed the O-ring just to kind of make it easier to take out. Basically at that point, pull the end cap out, and usually there is a little bit of oils behind the cap that Fox installs there, or may have come by the IFP. So don't freak out if you see a little bit of oil behind there. That's perfectly normal. What you do want to do at the point of when you do remove this cap is take like a shop rag and make sure you wipe this reservoir out really good. Get any debris that you'd have from drilling out the plug, and any grit or sand or mud that would be accumulated in the snap ring gland. So you really want to take some brake clean and either a shop rag or shop towel, and really make sure you get that cleaned out really good. So then at that point, take your replacement end cap, and I've already put a little bit of film of grease on the O-ring, and insert that onto your replacement end cap, and actually just put it right back inside there. And take a rubber mallet and just tap it in. Push it all the way in until it sits up against that gland, and reinstall your snap ring. Make sure it's fully engaged, and we'll actually recharge the shock. I typically, since we've had the shock apart, we now have atmospheric air in the reservoir, which we don't want. Atmospheric air has moisture and other contaminants, so we don't want that in the shock. So usually when I charge a shock, I want to charge it and purge it. And so basically I'm going to pressurize it and release the nitrogen pressure and or whatever air is in there, and so that we get pure nitrogen charge in there so that the shock can function. And I do pressurize up to 200 psi. That's just what I do. Fox for a lot of years has been doing that in the off-road shocks long before there ever was UTV shocks, and pretty much the components are very similar to Fox shock components that have been around for over 20 years. So I'll pressurize it and just show you that process. You want to make sure you get your no-loss chuck real tight on the Schrader valve, and turn my nitrogen pressure off and bleed off that pressure. And I'll usually do that a couple times. I'm only just going to do it one more time just for the sake of the video, but pressurize it up to 200 psi. And I've got 200 psi on my gauge. I'm going to back off my no-loss chuck, and the shock is now pressurized. And I can bleed off any pressure in here and remove the no-loss chuck, and that shock is done. So pretty easy to do, and like I said, you can do that on the vehicle. And like I said, just make sure you jack up your vehicle so that you don't have the vehicle load on the shocks while you're doing it. And once you've got them charged up and purged, I'm a fan of the of the Fox O-ring cap, which is going to seal that Schrader valve that's kind of recessed in that pocket, and it kind of seals that from dirt, mud, and grit, and whatever else you can throw at your UTV when you're out having fun. And it basically makes the shock function really good. And if you ever do need to service or charge the shock, you take that off and you're going to have a nice clean Schrader valve to work with. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.